DeSanto Propane is 4 generations strong as a trustworthy, family-owned business with unmatched customer service. Go online at DeSantoPropane.com for more info or call toll-free at 1-800-752-4574 today. Since 1937, the difference has been DeSanto Propane.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Against the Boards. I'm your host, Chamberlain Bauder, here for another week of talking lacrosse and hockey up in the Flower City. As we look to the Rochester Americans first this week, it was a tough ending to the month of March with 2 shootout losses over February 28th and March 1st, 2 division rivals in the Utica Comets and the Syracuse Crunch. But don't let that take away from what the month of February was for the Rochester Americans, and it was capped off by a successful win for Devin Levi of goaltender of the month in the AHL for his 5-2 record when starting through the month of February. Of course, there was that nice 4-game win streak from mid-February when they were at home for all 4 of those games, with the win over Cleveland, win over Belleville, over Toronto, and over Wilkes-Barre Scranton. But ultimately, Utica and Syracuse putting a little bit of a sour taste in the mouth of Amerks fans. Their next game will be a away stint this weekend as they go to take on Laval. And if you have AHL TV, I would be dialed into this one. And if you don't, I'd probably be dialed into the Fan listening to Don Stevens and Andrew Mossbrooks call these games, because honestly, when I look through the rest of the season for the Americans in these next 2 months, these are probably the best away games that they're going to have on their schedule for the rest of the year. They will get to take on Laval one more time at home. I would definitely recommend that in the month of April, you get down to Blue Cross Arena on the 11th to watch that matchup, because this is one team that it feels like can consistently stack up with the Amerks and put them on their heels. And it's honestly, I say that and it sounds a little concerning as a fan that you'd want to watch that, but that's the level of competition that this team needs right now. They're that good. They're that skilled. They can roll whoever they want right now out there on a line. And ultimately, games against Laval, when they're going to be taking on likely in at least one of those 2 games this weekend, they're going to take on Caden Primo, which they didn't have to deal with last time that they played against Laval, and they're always going to have to deal with Alexander Barry-Boulet. So, honestly, Laval is just one of my favorite matchups this season to watch with the Amerks. So this weekend should be nothing short of interesting, to say the least, for those 2 games. Other news from the Amerks as we keep it going a little fast with Rochester right now, because like we said, the Amerks were on this away stint and they're still away through this weekend. So we're not even going to have a chance to actually sit down with any Amerks until next week during practices. So keep an ear out for that interview. Hopefully a Devin Levi interview coming soon for the show. But right now, with the Amerks being away, just not a lot of news. But the last thing, Victor Neuchev underwent a successful season-ending shoulder injury. We just received word of it in the media today. So something to note that, of course, the 3rd-round selection will be out for the remainder of the year. But all in all, he was a guy that was not a consistent member of the lineup throughout this season. He had dealt with a couple of knocks and different things at different times, but he was also still in that area of being a young foreign player who doesn't completely understand the culture that is in Rochester. He definitely was getting to it in the end of his season last year, but ultimately this is going to push him back a little, but I don't think it's going to necessarily hold back the Amerks in any major ways as their season is going to go on. That, I think, does it for us on our Amerks talk. Pretty quick, pretty short and sweet and to the point. But yeah, a tough weekend last weekend with a 3-2 shootout loss to the Utica Comets, a 4-3 shootout loss to the Syracuse Crunch. But going to definitely try to bounce back as they are taking on the double of the Laval Rocket. And ultimately, when we look at this matchup, really, the interesting thing here is what will it do sorry for the voice crack. What will it do to the standings? Obviously, Rochester's still played one more game than Laval right now on the record sheet. If Laval wins that first game, they're going to jump Rochester in the standings. So it'll all come down to that first matchup ultimately. If Rochester can pull out at least one of these two wins, though, they will stay atop the North Division, and they will stay atop the entire AHL at their what would be 76-point mark. Right now, sitting at 74, 1 clear of Laval, 3 clear of Hershey. That is the current state of everything for the Rochester Americans. And now we'll turn our attentions to the Rochester Knighthawks, who in their last 2 games actually came out with massive wins. And with those wins, moved themselves into right now a playoff spot in the NLL postseason. Now, still plenty of games left to play, still 5 for the Knighthawks specifically, and they have played the most games of anybody in the NLL. They are the only team to have played 13 games so far in the NLL season this year. So keep that in mind as well as we go. They're going to have some bye weeks that we have to really hope for some losses from certain teams that are above them to come in. Because it's just interesting when you look at this. We've been talking about it all season with the NLL. The gap is marginal, to say the least, between 6 and 11. So that is 3 playoff spots right there that are up for grabs between 6 different teams that are all between 6-6 and 5-6. I mean, that is a singular game and then tiebreakers separating all of these teams between 6 and 11 in the standings right now. Rochester is at 7, just behind Calgary, solely because they have played one more game than Calgary, and they have lost that one, so their winning percentage is lower. But if they're both 500, Rochester has the tiebreaker over Calgary, they bump up to 6th in that case. So as we're saying this, just know everything is super, super close and super tight in the NLL. 5 more games left on the season for the Rochester Knighthawks. Last week, a big-time win, 14-7 over the Albany Firewolves. If you think I'm going to change my superstition on which way we predict these games, you're wrong. But with 5 more games left, they're going to play on Friday at Las Vegas, so expect a late start for that one, being on the West Coast, of course. Then the week following, taking on the Ottawa Black Bears on the road as well. Then it's a bye week before wrapping up the season on a 3-week home stretch. They'll take on the Seals at the end of March at home, Ottawa at home the first week of April, and then Toronto 2 weeks later to close out the regular season will be in Rochester. Now, that last 3 sets of games at home, I think I would like, ultimately, the way that it sets up. These next 2 on the road are going to be a little bit interesting, I have to say. First things first, this Las Vegas team is, if you thought 3-8 Albany was a trap game, you've got a whole other thing coming. Because at least with Albany, you could look at them and go, oh, they were in the NLL finals last year. We really should take them seriously despite being 3-8. Meanwhile, Las Vegas is 3-9. Their only wins of the season have come against Albany, San Diego, and Colorado. Colorado was the only win they've had this year by more than 2 goals. All season. The only win that they've had by more than 2 goals. And when we look through their losses, they only lost 2 games by less than 4 goals on the season. So this team is 100% scraping for their wins. They're scrapping for their wins. They've got a coach that understands our coach very well in Sean Williams, having been a former teammate of Mike Hazen and been a long-time Rochester Nighthawk. I see trap game written all over this game. So definitely something to keep an eye on as we get going. But before we get into any more and we talk about this matchup specifically with Albany, I had the chance before the game last weekend to sit down with the Nighthawks captain, Dan Coates, who is just back from injury and back into the lineup over the last 3 weeks or so. So we'll send it to that interview right now. We're going here with Knighthawks captain Dan Coates ahead of this matchup against the Albany Firewolves. So first question for you, obviously coming off of this Calgary game last week. For me watching it, it felt like maybe the most complete game that the team has played this season. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think we felt that. I think all year you're striving for that consistency for 60 minutes, and I think when we kind of walked in the locker room after, we said, okay, that's it. Can we replicate that?
Right. I mean, when you talk about replicating it, where is maybe the first point of that game that you look at to repeat?
I think for us, it's playing with some urgency, and then we're dictating the pace. I think we're focused on being the best version of ourselves. And just playing our game. I think we know the talent that's in the locker room, and at the end of the day, it comes down to hard work, and we can't win on talent alone. We're not there yet. So I thought we just outworked last week, and we got to do that tonight. Yeah,
I feel like one of the key telling factors of that when you look to the stat sheet is transition. And usually Calgary is a big-time transition opportunity team. That didn't feel like it was necessarily the case all day on the game last week. Just what is the key to dictating that pace? What are the little things that you can do as a team to dictate?
It's a commitment, especially from our offense, getting off the floor. And as simple as that sounds, it's a big part of this game that maybe the average fan doesn't see. But, whether it's a shot on net or rebounds, we need our near side guys getting off the floor. And our defense doing the same thing, coming up and getting on the floor and sorting out. So at the end of the day, it's hard work, it's communication, but it's very simple. It's just like you got to put the effort and get off, and it's recognizing, when's the shot clock getting down, the opportunity, what's the score in the game, the quarter. So there's different factors that go into it, but at the end of the day, our offense did a great job in Calgary, and we're going to need that from them again tonight.
Yeah, last thing about, games right now this season, before I ask you about a couple other things. Obviously, Albany tonight, they come in with 3 wins on their record, but of their 8 losses, 5 of them are to Saskatchewan, Calgary, Buffalo, and Halifax. Just how irrelevant are records at this point in the NLL, and when you go up against a team that was in the NLL finals last year, just what is the mindset there?
Yeah, you said it, and this team, they were in the finals last year. They have experience. They're a younger squad. It's kind of funny. You don't want to look too much in the standings, but it's just every week you're looking at scores and teams are beating everyone, right? There's so much parity in the league. But yeah, it's for us, it's like we can't worry about the outside noise as far as teams' records. We just got to focus on being the best version of the Rochester Knighthawks. And it's so cliche, but it's a game at a time. We got to respect them. They're a younger group, added some young pieces, but we know it's going to be a battle. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah, actually, you made me think of one more that I do have to ask you. Obviously, you get to this point in the season, there's this stretch from 3 to 10 in the league standings right now where everyone seems like they're within 1 game of each other. But when push comes to shove, just because of the way your season was put together, you guys almost have to win out, essentially, to be in a competitive place for the playoffs. Just where does that factor into that game of the time mentality?
Yeah, and for us, it's playoffs, right? Like usually playoffs are coming the end of April or May, but for us, it's end of February. And it's just the reality of, a tough schedule at the beginning of the year and, a couple people injured. So it is what it is. Our records, it is what it is. We cannot change that. But what we can control is our effort, our attitude day in and day out. And tonight's a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, definitely. You talk about injuries to certain guys, and one of the guys that I think of still is Mitch Ogilvie, who hasn't been in the lineup yet this season. But his name then cues me to think of all of these young guys that over the time since you've joined the squad have grown into more adults as defenders. Can you just talk me through your experience from being really an on-field coach for so many of these guys at one time to the course of them growing up as Knighthawks?
Yeah, it's pretty cool to kind of see the maturation process of an individual. And, I remember being in those shoes at one point or another, and the best way to learn is through experience. And, you're seeing these guys. I look at a guy like Taylor Jensen and how much he's grown in these last 2 years. But, we're missing Mitch Ogilvie. We're missing him in the locker room. Obviously, we're We hope he's going to be back with us at some point. Don't know when that is, but yeah, it's just an opportunity for guys to step up. But yeah, I think all the vets in the room try to get in a guy's ear. Like I love talking with Jake Pacino, and I was fortunate enough to coach him, but just he's a student of the game, and I love kind of teaching that, because you can see he's going to be a great player, and the more of these young guys get opportunities, they just kind of seem to flourish with it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and you brought it up a little bit right there with the veterans, but your group has really rounded out over the years with guys like OC coming in there, Gillies being in the back. You get Lordy and Tutton in this year. Just how has this defense, I guess, changed over the last couple of years? Yeah,
it's well, we've added a lot of pieces in the back end. We certainly have gotten older, and with that comes experience. Guys who've won some, high-level lacrosse outside the NLL, within the NLL. But I just think it's just guys who have been there know, certain points of a season or a game, what experience kind of we can draw from, right? And I think that just kind of makes it easier for these younger guys. And, when I first came in, I think these younger guys had to be kind of in a leadership role, and now they can just kind of go out and do their job, and we can kind of bring them along with us. But it certainly helps having that veteran leadership back there.
Yeah. Rylan Hartley's obviously still a super young goalie. Obviously misses part of this season, but for you as a captain and as a defensive player, just what are the keys for you to help him be successful?
Well, Hartz he's such an energetic guy. He's, we know where he wants to see the ball from, and we know what shots we want to give up so he can make a stop. I think for us, it's plain simple. It's being physical. We communicate, and we're forcing guys into situations where they're uncomfortable, and we trust, and we rely on Hartz to make those big stops, especially down the stretch here. So he's a fun kid to be around. Hutchie's done a great job for us as well too. Two different goalies, but we feel very confident with both of them in that, and Orly as well.
Yeah. Rylan Reese and you have a special relationship as co-coaches for the UCVLL. You're also then co-captains, obviously, as he's one of your alternates for the Knighthawks. Just what is that relationship like? How does it transition from whether it's the field to the bench or the bench to the field between you two? Yeah,
I think you form a certain bond, right? And through everything, it's just experience. And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to coach with him the last 2 years, and obviously been on the Knighthawks with him the last 4 years. And we've, gained some friendship outside of the game too. I think he's 10 years younger than myself, but I find I'm pretty close to him as well too. He's a great individual, but yeah, that certain bond and experience that you gain through coaching, I think it just translates to on the floor, on the bench, and you need that. It's not just two guys. You need kind of everyone kind of being able to, whether it's a relationship on and off the floor, and it translates to on the floor. If you care about a teammate, you're gonna run through the wall for them out there. So I think that's what we're doing a better job of not just two guys, but our entire team. That's a close-knit unit in our locker room. I think that's what we're really proud of, is the culture that we've created.
Yeah. The last thing for you. Obviously, when you get the C on your chest, you get it back on your chest as a Nighthawk for the first time as a Nighthawk, but you have been a captain before. Just talk me through what it meant for you when you got the C as a Nighthawk.
Yeah, I think, it means a lot, because the coaches, your peers, management, respect you enough to put you in that position. I never, when I started playing this game, it was never a goal to be a captain. I think for me, it just I wanted to be the hardest worker on my team, whatever team that was. And I've gained some experience, and I just feel like I have a pretty good pulse on our guys, whether that's in moments of the game, practice, off the field. I just try to go about my business and lead by example, and if I feel like something needs to be said, I try to address it. But it means the world, and having, you look at the history of professional lacrosse in Rochester and the guys who've worn the C's here. It's just such an honor, going back to Mike Hazen and the long list: Sean Williams, Ray Mearns, Dewey Jacobs, Reggie Thorpe, Gary Gate. There's a lot of guys.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool company to be in.
There was Dan Coates, captain of the Rochester Knighthawks. Obviously, most fans know the way that he became the captain of this team. A couple years ago,
Carey and Hazen decided that they no longer were in need of Captain Paul Dawson as one of their defensive options, let him walk in free agency, and passed the captaincy on to Dan Coates, who was previously the captain for the Colorado Mammoth before being taken in the expansion draft by the Knighthawks, which, again, a situation that makes a lot of sense. If you've been tuned into our episodes, you know Dan Carey, the former assistant general manager of Colorado. Why wouldn't he take the captain with him when he knows that he can make an impact on the Knighthawks? And now the rest is all just essentially history. So Coates joins the team. As the captain, he's back healthy, starting in the middle of that defense, coaching the group from the floor. And right now, off of 2 weeks, 2 big-time wins for the Rochester Knighthawks. Of course, that 15-10 win over the Calgary Roughnecks 2 weeks ago was massive. At the time, it was probably the most complete game that the Knighthawks had played all season. And then last week, they topped it. 14-7 over the Albany Firewolves. Rylan Hartley was making save after save after save. He ended the day with, I believe, just under 40, I want to say, in that one, as we try to look to the exact numbers. 36 saves was the final on 43 shots on goal. Dougie Jameson had to stop 50 before he left the net. Andrew Kidd got a couple minutes in the end there as the game was pretty much clips. But ultimately, this is what we want to look at with these games. In both of these 2 games, we talk about a complete game and a full 60. In both of these games, the game winner was scored in the third quarter. And then they still held through the fourth to push out and pull out their win. That is the definition of a Knighthawks complete game in my mind, is that despite getting to the number that they have to get to maybe early, they can still then, through the back stretch of the game, hold out, strong defense, and shut a game down and turn it over. That definitely felt like it was the case, specifically against this Albany team. I mean, we talked about 2 weeks ago, the key to the Calgary game was Jesse King, right? Cutting down a guy who averages about 6+ assists a game, it seems. In the game against the Knighthawks, he had 1 goal and 2 assists. He also, ironically enough, last week against Las Vegas, when they played, had a very minimal scoring, and that was the reason that they lost there too. So maybe the Knighthawks found the key to this Calgary offense. But when we were in the pregame press conferences for this Albany game, I also asked Coach Hazen, who were the guys for Albany that you need to cut out the same way as Jesse King? Because realistically, you look through this Albany lineup, and I think it would probably be Ethan Walker that has the most similar game to a Jesse King. Not just because he's left-handed, but mostly because Simmons and Kurtz on the right side, who are premier shooters, are just that. They're premier shooters. They're going to score goals, and that's not necessarily what the goal of the Rochester offense was trying to cut off. They wanted to get to hands and just force bad passes and not allow those setting up shots. But ultimately, they completely shut down Ethan Walker, Alex Simmons, and Ty Kurtz. Ty Kurtz ended the game with only 1 assist to his name. Ethan Walker had 2 assists, and then Alex Simmons entered the game with a goal and 3 assists. Now, a goal and 3 assists might sound okay, but ultimately, when we're talking about Alex Simmons' numbers, he's probably more of a 3-and-3 or more kind of a guy. So to be holding him to 4 is exactly what you want. Only 1 player even makes a hat trick for Albany, and that's Dyson Williams. It's the first time for the Amerks, or for the Knighthawks, ever seeing Dyson Williams. So definitely makes sense that ultimately he's the one that's able to go off. And the quote from Hazen, if you want to go get the direct quote from the post-game press conference, go for it, but I'll paraphrase here. Basically, if you can let one guy play his game and everyone else is completely shut down, ultimately that will be enough to pull out a game. And it was here against the Albany Firewolves. Now, in another week, taking on the Las Vegas Desert Dogs, look to Jonathan Donville and Jack Hanna as the 2 cutoff guys. If they can shut them down, that's the game. It's really probably as simple as that if I had to state it. But one other quick point from last week, also press conferences, if you want to go and watch, definitely should take the time for the Hazen and Hartley interviews from last week. Those two specifically from postgame were long, informative, and the Hartley one was just nice to give fans a reminder of who their goalie is, because really when push comes to shove, I've never found a player that looks like they have more fun when they're on the floor despite being dialed in, and is also more superstitious than Rylan Hartley. I mean, genuinely, it's just so funny to hear from him the different things that he has to do exactly the same on a game day. Just the way that he operates in life is with this superstition over him. But he also, like we said, likes to have fun even when he's completely dialed in out there on the floor. In these last 2 weeks, you couldn't talk to Rylan Hartley in the hour before the game, and he's still probably the most fun guy out there on the floor. Just take a look at this as an example. His goal celebration dance, he does exactly the same thing every time. I was posted up next to the photo hole for a couple of goals, and it's just a little kick out to the front of the crease and then a kick back when he gets back into the end of the crease. And it doesn't look like much, but ironically enough, it is literally exactly the same motion every single time that the Knighthawks score. I almost think that Hartley has the mindset that if he didn't do this, he would get scored on and they would immediately lose the faceoff and he'd get scored on off the faceoff. That's just like the mindset of this goalie. So you can fully understand. But he's awesome. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Ryan Smith obviously has a massive game against Albany, 4-3. Connor Fields, 5 assists to lead the team. Ryan Lanchberry with 2 big-time goals in the closing of that game in the fourth quarter as icing in that one. And then 4 assists along with that as well. A bit of a quieter day for Thomas McConvey. He still ends with 5 points, 1 goal and 4 assists in that one. And Jake Pacino got into the lineup, scored the last goal of the game on an empty netter. But just nice to see ultimately that as Ethan O'Connor was scratched last week for some knocks, you bring in Jake Pacino. And not only did he fit into the defensive effort seamlessly, they then give him the opportunity in the closing minutes of the game to take that empty netter. So the Knighthawks, as we've been saying, sit at 7th in the NLL standings right now. 5 games left in their regular season. 2 on the road to start, and then they'll come home for the remainder of the year. This is going to be over the span of 7 weeks, though, so they'll have 2 bye weeks in the midst of these games. So when we get to those bye weeks, that's when we'll talk about the math and where we need certain teams to give a game to the Knighthawks and whatnot. But right now, it's the Las Vegas Desert Dogs up next. Sean Williams trying to take on his old teammate in Mike Hazen, and we'll see what kind of bag of tricks either of them have for the other. But of course, 2 young goalies, likely a high-scoring affair. The first week of the season, these 2 teams played, and the Knighthawks won 14-12. Now, as we get to the prediction, we know where I have to sit on this. And so, I think, realistically, first things first, I think Hartley's had 2 great weeks, and he doesn't look like he's slowing down. So I don't think that this game goes over 12 goals for either team, like it did last time with the 14-12. I think that's too high of a score for the way that, honestly, both of these goalies have been playing. Landon Kells has been playing out of his mind for the Las Vegas Desert Dogs as well. So I'm going to say 11-9 Las Vegas. And if you don't know why I'm taking Las Vegas, just go check out last week's episode at the very end, and you'll theoretically fully understand. I was talking about it in the press room, actually, that, well, I guess I have to pick against him again, and everyone in the room said, yes, you do. That is exactly how that has to work. Everyone in the Knighthawks that covers them got a little bit of superstition from Rylan Hartley, I'll be completely honest. But that is the case. Time for that game on my site right now is not listed, but as we said, it's going to be a late game because it's on the West Coast tomorrow night.
against the Las Vegas Desert Dogs for the Rochester Knighthawks. And the Americans got to be taking on that double away stretch against Laval this weekend. Friday's game starts at 7 p.m. That's going to do it for us this week on Against the Boards. Big thanks to my producer, Paul Russo, and from myself, Chamberlain Bauder. So long.